Here I'm going to be talking a lot about, I think, most of the challenges that we face as HR professionals when we're asked from the companies to somehow improve company culture. There's always an expectation that we can easily resolve these things by a few simple, policy alterations, or introducing things like remote working, or, quite famously, I've seen on LinkedIn about the thing about pizza Fridays and all that sort of thing. What I'm aiming to do in this session is actually break down the kind of complex way that company culture is either set or reset, and how it actually all interrelates in relation to the company structure. But before I go really into the details of that, just a brief introduction about myself. My name's Darren Street. I've done quite a few positions, leadership and HR advisory roles. Throughout my career, I've had a number of in-house and project consultant roles. I've been in a lot of change management projects, both in-house and out-house. That's been in terms of organization design as well as system change. I'm registered in the BPS, and therefore I can do cognitive and psychometric testing. And I've been in the field for about 17 years. In terms of my education background, back in the day, back in about 2004, I graduated in psychology at London South Bank University. Then I spent a number of years in kind of admin roles and actually psychology roles. And then I suddenly decided that I wanted to kind of go more into the organization route. And then by 2010, I graduated a master's in occupational psychology. Ever since I actually graduated in my psychology back in 2004, I've been a member of the British Psychological Society. And then from 2010 onwards, I've also been a member of the Division of Occupational Psychology, a sub-branch of that British Psychological Society membership. In terms of experience, in terms of industrial experience, I've been in terms of manufacturing. I've actually worked for mining companies, utility companies, IT and telecommunications, architecture and engineering, and defense and technologies. They are in my primary focuses. I have been in other industries as well, but these have been the main ones there. In terms of roles or projects or in-house things that I've actually managed over my time, has either been in terms of organization design, in terms of restructuring, manpower, and looking at the way that happens, resetting other structures such as grading structures, comp and bend structures. I've done a lot in the performance review cycles in terms of resetting those, establishing those, and cascading those. So a lot of kind of performance management and the cascade of objectives. Workflows, policy documents and procedures. I've done quite a few of those in my time. I've done some in-house management roles, so HR management roles in different parts of HR, which operations or recruitment or talent management, and also kind of ecosystems. So I've been part of digital transformation in the HR side, helping reset all those sorts of things there. Anyway, that's a brief history about myself in terms of the HR career that I have had. Now on to the actual session itself. So before we get to the actual specific topic of company values, what we must kind of understand as we go towards those steps is what is the influences that kind of help us set or reset company values. Now, normally when this question is posed, the company is starting to go through some sort of fundamental change. Maybe it's a change of direction, maybe it's a change of maturity in their setup, and maybe they're looking in terms of pivoting and a different focus. Now here we talk about the strategic side of things in terms of, trying to reset the strategy. Now here they come in a number of guises. They can be, the typical 5-year to 10-year strategy. Nowadays we come into things like setting OKRs and then trying to find general statements, the mission and vision statements, or kind of purpose and aspiration statements, whichever terminology that your company is preferring at that point. The key bit here is actually to kind of, as a consultant or as the in-house kind of HR, is to help guide and set and establish this with the strategy team. So here, one of the most important things that we need to be able to do as a consultant or an advisor in HR and strategy is try to provide the adequate benchmarking to understand that fundamental aims. The benchmarking in terms of where you are in comparison to your other competitors, to understand if you're pivoting into a unique space within that competitor market, or are you making best-in-class products or services? What is it? And the key thing here is identifying exactly what it is that you're actually aiming towards in your new fundamental pivot. That in itself, once you identify what that is and you're able to present that, then you can establish with your key stakeholders, your senior team, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of the change? What is now the purpose of the company? And not only do you do an external benchmarking here, but you also need to do some self-reflection within your company as well, some internal benchmarking. What are you good at? What have been successes? What have been your pain points? What is it that you need to change to go into this new direction that you're looking to do? And then obviously you need to be able to present that very clearly and concisely to your senior team to help them reimagine the new setup and the new direction of the company at that point. Now, benchmarking, I make it sounds very simple. It's not. It takes a lot of work. So if you're doing it yourselves or you're monitoring consultants that are undertaking it, you need to really kind of understand how they are coming up with this information, where they're getting their research from, how valid is that research, and being always questioning in terms of understanding about what is being reflected to you from that research there. And for you is to also break it down so your C-suite understands what is being said to them as well. There's always a lot of buzzwords. I've been in quite a few sessions where consultants are presenting to the C-suite in terms of, fancy buzzwords about how you can break market and, pivoting here and you're a leader in this, and, they come up with lots of fancy names and terminologies. But in the end, your role is to try to make sure that the leadership actually understands what is being told to them and how that influences their decision. So going back to our map, we hopefully through that benchmarking and a few sessions with the C-suite team are able to kind of understand our fundamental aims and hopefully redevelop our kind of mission and vision statement here. Now, traditionally, what most companies focus on immediately is what I call the what. It's what are we doing, and then it's about what are we measuring. So here I've just kind of extended out exactly what most companies actually focus on the most. And like I said, some develop a scorecard or an OKR system, where they're trying to reflect the key objectives and then cascading them down into annual department KPIs. And then that comes into individual objectives, and that can then you come to measuring those. So here, most companies are focusing on the measurable aspects of the pivot. And okay, that is very important. You need to understand and break down the what it is that you're trying to achieve over that 5-year plan. And you need to kind of be able to measure that over that period of time. However, a lot of the companies then kind of ignore or leave to chance what I call the how side. How do we want to go about achieving these objectives? what sort of employees do we need? What sort of employee mindset do we need in order for them to carry out these targets? And this is very important. And this is where the crux of, setting the company values comes with. And it's not just a case of just saying, oh, we need clear communication or clear collaboration, or, just plucking out values out of the air, or just looking at your competitors and copying them. This is where you need to kind of pivot and look into, kind of stakeholder management area here and stakeholder analysis. And here again, you kind of need to identify through the stakeholders what is the type of employee you need to help you deliver on the targets or the long-term objectives that you have set. Are you aggressively looking to grow? Is that, most of your objectives? You're looking to take over in a market. You're aggressively trying to grow really rapidly and fast. Well, the type of people that you need at that point are people that are autonomous, that are agile, that are aggressive. In fact, aggressive in the way that they, come about decisions very quickly and, be very key in that sense. Or maybe you're a company that's looking to mature, or, you're looking to actually be best in class and best in practice and looking to grow your services in terms of quality. Well, then you need a different sort of person. You need someone that has high quality and always constantly self-check-in and, slow things down and always wants to make good decision making rather than being fast and aggressive and things like that. So you have to kind of work with your stakeholders in terms of how to identify the type of people you need in order to kind of identify the type of values you would need. But then another key factor that you need to take into account whilst talking to your stakeholders are they going to be exemplifiers of these values that you are designing with them? It's all well and good that you come up with a set of values, but you need the C-suite, you need the very senior, mature team to actually act in the way of those company values that you've just set. There's no good kind of saying, oh, we want everybody to be agile and self-managing if your C-suite are very much kind of everybody needs to sign in, have very strict time and attendance. That's not going to work. So you need to identify the values that also the C-suite can adhere and exemplify, so therefore it has a very positive effect. And that's where the alignment comes in. So all the C-suites have to be aligned. Admittedly, your CEO or whoever's in charge of the company is at the top of the tree, so it is very key that they are, but it's also key that the whole C-suite are aligned in kind of setting these company values, understanding these company values, and exemplifying these company values that you identify. And then you have to, understand, what is actually really required. So going back to what I said just earlier, which is, we need a type of person that's like this, and we need them like this at different levels of the organization. A sales agent at, the kind of employee level of the business, someone that doesn't have any managerial expertise, how do you need them to behave? What requirements do you need from them? So then once you've actually, and then obviously as you go up the ladder in terms of the management chain, it's like, how do you build on top of that requirement in terms of becoming a sales agent to becoming a sales manager, and then the department head of that sales management team, and then in terms of the C-suite of that sales management team, as an example. So you really have to, think about the values. It's not just about grabbing the latest buzzword of, how do you say communication in a different way, or how do you say collaboration in a different way? Yes, they still might be fundamental to you in the company value, but you must put them in there because there is a solid reason to have them there. And at this point, you should be identifying about 4 or 5 key value items that is in relation to your long-term strategy and goals. So going back to the model here, assuming that we have set our company values and that criteria, here you kind of normally build it in some paperwork there. This is where the classic chart on the wall comes from. You know, you have your company values, you have your little synopsis about what the company value is. And in most companies, that's kind of where it ends. You know, that plaque on the wall, the kind of buzzwords for a few months. You know, sometimes we send out an emailer, but there's not really much going on. To actually get it embedded into the company, you need to go a layer down into the competencies. And here you can develop some company core competencies based on the value. And what you can do is then build for each level of the business a set of kind of behaviors and kind of competency examples that you need in each one. So for example, you might have identified communication. So what does that look like for a member of the employee? You know, is it about politeness? Is it about directness? What is the sort of examples that you're expecting them to show? Here it's about setting the foundation of people understanding what is expected of them. And like I said, this is the bit that's kind of mostly forgotten about. Here you have the company values, where you have the brief kind of review or the kind of synopsis of generally what the value is. Competency is getting into the details and understanding specifically examples of each of the employees' kind of job area and job level. And this can take a bit of time to actually develop. You know, you really have to sit and think and work with the department heads, work at the different levels of the company to try to put these exemplifiers, these examples in there, in your thing. Now, at this stage, the critical element to this is the line managers. Funny enough, you need the line managers to be on board in relation to the cascade of company values down into company competencies. Because in the end, the evaluation of these company competencies are going to come from the line managers on their employees. So you need to make sure that any company values and company competencies that you actually develop is understood by your line managers levels. If that requires learning and training to help guide them, then you need to underdo that, and you need to reinforce that. You need not just every time you change your company values, you do one set of learning and training. No, you need to do this every single year. You need to make sure that there is, you know, updates, that there are chances for line managers to provide their feedback and their experiences of trying to manage people with these company competencies. And that would ascertain whether or not line managers still understand what the company competencies are. This is also another level of exemplifiers. So the line managers themselves need to exemplify where and you know, to their staff that they can that they follow the company values and company competencies there. And what we need to also ascertain at this point is, do the line managers have the skills? You know, at this point, what I find in most companies is that line managers kind of suffer a lot because they have not been given the ability or the learning and training in terms of the people management skills side. What I find in a lot of companies is line managers are expected just to automatically pick up the management mantle after they've been promoted from their technical role, and to just be able to somehow magically manage their team. Now here, what we need to ensure from a HR perspective, that we provide them with the learning and training to take that step up in the management cycle and understand that people management skills and how they can, you know, manage their employees, not just in terms of the work that they do, but in terms of their career management, which is also part of understanding their competencies and being able to manage their team's competencies there. Okay, moving on. So we have developed the company competencies at this point, and we should have a model in place, and you would have the paperwork out there, and you have it there, and then you need to actually update your policies and procedures to be aligned with this. Now, this is where you can start introducing the tools of things that I mentioned earlier, things like, you know, the working from home, you know, the kind of flexi time model and stuff like that. But the reason that you introduce these things is because it helps enhance the value, that the company value. If you are advertising a very agile kind of way of working, and in your company values you want everybody to be agile and self-managing, and then your policies and procedures, you can start to bring in things like working from home and flexi time. It makes sense because you're giving the responsibility there. But if you are a type of organization that is very orientated on time and attendance, and that's very key and critical for you, then if you're going to introduce a remote working which is heavily policed, it kind of is counterintuitive of why you have brought that in the first place. So again, you know, I see all these LinkedIn posts recently about, you know, how key it is just to introduce the freedom and accountability and responsibility to your employees by giving them the option of remote working and flexi time. But the challenge I find is that, yes, you give it to them, but that cascade does not happen. You need to change the company's mindset to be accommodating for that sort of setup there. So if you're ever thinking about, I think my company's ready for those sorts of, you know, tools, I call them tools, you know, the flexi time and those changes to policies and stuff, then you need to kind of understand what is your company values saying to your staff at this point. You know, is it saying that, yes, we trust in you, we give you the responsibility and accountability of doing it? Or is the value at this point a kind of like a police state? We always monitor you, we always check on you, we always, you know, want to know where you are and what you're doing. You know, you need to, you know, fit the tools for the foundation of what you're trying to achieve there. So that is very critical in terms of kind of setting that up. So once you have set those up, then you kind of need to reinforce, you know, reinforce that the company values and the company competencies are doing, and that, you know, you do this through your reward and recognition here. So you've set your policies and procedures up, and then what you do is throughout the year, you try to attune all your sorts of rewards that you do, such as if you have like an employee of the quarter or an employee of the year or whatever it is, try to relate that to something that they have done that is in relation to the company value or the company competency, you know, and really emphasize that. So then that kind of shows that the employee has understood the company competency, you have rewarded that company competency, which now makes them an exemplifier to everybody else in the company, and you have reinforced it to everybody that this is the behavior that we're looking for, and this is how we would like you to be and step up into this you know, way of life in our company now. But then you need to kind of vary these rewards and recognitions. You know, it's not just, you know, single event that happens once a quarter. You need to kind of reinforce this through notifications on any systems that you have, even if it's just simple emailers or intranet sites. You need to keep that, you know, always present of mind within your staff. Don't just leave it for like once a quarter or once a year. Keep that going and keep the recognitions varied. You know, it could be something as simple as a certificate, or it could be a monetary award, or it could be taking them out, giving them a special type of training in relation to their area. You know, just try to relate everything that you do back to this message of this is how we want you to behave. So, whenever anyone is nominated, they are nominated because they behaved in this way that we wanted them to, and we are going to give them a reward that helps aid them going that way in the future. And then when we come to a kind of overall thing that we need to actually maintain throughout when we're developing company values or company competencies, is communication. Communication is key all the way through the process of this. And you need to kind of make sure that when you're starting from even altering the company strategy to altering the company values and their competencies, is that you have a communication strategy in place through all those parts. And you need the key stakeholders to be present at different stages of this communication. Through, if it's town hall announcements, if it's through doing workshops, and that could be face-to-face workshops or online webinar workshops. It can be the kind of emailers, it can be intranet posting sites, but always make it strategic and always try to make it regular throughout the year. And you might come to a point where you think that the company values have been embedded, but you should always continue the messaging. Even after once you think that it's embedded, you need to keep on reinforcing it. You need to keep on varying that communication, keep it bright, light, and inclusive. And it must always be there and contained. So in terms of company values, that's actually all that I had for in terms of setting up the values themselves. And going back to the actual model here, you can kind of see how everything interrelates. So here, I've gone into the details of the how side of the process. And as you can see, there are links that link the whole thing up here. So, as you're going throughout the year of kind of monitoring your company's progress, you've got the what in terms of the department goals and values, and then you have your kind of yearly performance where you monitor your employees and how they have performed against the yearly targets. But then you also need to kind of measure them in terms of how did they contribute, in what way, what was their behavior like, was it as the sort of behavior that we need in the company to move us that forward, and then how do we actually reward that side of things there. So that brings me to the end of the actual long part of the presentation. If there are any questions, by all means, feel free to kind of ask away. I'm happy to take any comments or any feedback, as well as any questions that you want me to go in more details about in relation to company values.
Thank you, Darren. It was a mind striking, I would say, because when you showed the company strategy, I would say the what portion is always taken care of. The how portion is, as you said, is often forgot or is not being addressed properly. A lot of things you mentioned there, especially when the stakeholders importance about the line manager's importance, which is very critical to be on board in relation to the company values. Because when we set up the company values, it's always important that the line managers need to be aligned to that. Normally, what happens is the line managers are working solo, and it's only limited to the C-suite or maybe kind of the upper level management. So this has to be escalated down, or maybe say a kind of a de-escalated down towards all the parties. As you rightly said, employee recognition is a very key element. And with communication, all this strategy, all this, I would say this could be the vision board, which you have mentioned as a company strategy for any C-suite or any people or any person in their organizational setup. The what, before addressing the what element, the how element should be addressed. Darren, based on your vast experiences as a consultant or as a person or as a normal employee who's working in any organization, would you see that the how element normally companies prefer for that, or they set up the what first and then goes to the how?
So yes, good question. What I see, both as an in-house role and as a consultant role, what I see is that the C-suite tend to bring in consultants, and the consultants normally do a particularly good job in their plan. They actually tackle in their paperwork the both. But when it comes to the actual implementation of these things, what I tend to find that most companies just kind of focus on the what. And the way I see it is that I think that companies find that more tangible. They find it easier because there are easier metrics to kind of align it with. And then they always see the how as a kind of more difficult conversation. It's like, we have to bring everybody together and we're kind of needing to tell you how to be, but then they don't know how to do that, how to express that correctly and how to cascade that.
Right.
And what I try to advise the senior teams is that actually the best way to do it is to demonstrate it. Be the exemplifier of your actions. And actually, it's not something that changes just because you announce it and you put the plaque up on the wall. There has to be an embedding period. And you're talking about at least 6 to 12 months of an embedding period. And this is where, you need your exemplifiers at the C-suite and your exemplifiers at the line manager level to constantly reinforce this new way, this new approach, but if you don't have that buy-in at the beginning with the stakeholders, the C-suites, then the line managers won't catch on, and therefore the employees won't catch on. And that's why I think it's actually key when whoever it is, if it's you yourself or a consultant that you're bringing in to work with the C-suite, that actually try to identify what their strong or their strengths values are already in place and try to utilize their strengths. Most companies go, oh, we see, I don't know, like Coca-Cola have these value sets. Oh yeah, we want that. That's great that we'll bring that in. But then it has, no bearing on your company in terms of the value set that you need in your company. And, I'm not saying that all values have to be the same, but you just, if you're a CEO and you'll go, you know what, I want everybody to be agile and flexible, but you yourself, the way that you are, is making sure that people are there on time. You want to know their time and attendance. If you're not willing to change, then it doesn't matter if you introduce that flexibility or not, because if you're not going to change, then you're still just going to reinforce this message about, how time and attendance is an important value to you and therefore an important value to the company.